I am so excited for the presentation now. I'm transplanted. Now what? Now, why am I excited? Because this is being hosted by Steve Weed. If you haven't met Steve before, he's a nice guy. He has a wicked sense of humor. Uh, he's part of the Champions of Kidney Care, which is the advocacy group with Renal Support Network. And that's how I've gotten to know him better. And Steve is going to be your moderator for the presentation today. Steve is an educator, I believe, but even if he isn't trained to be an educator, Steve likes to educate everybody he meets about organ donation, about kidney disease, and about the legislation that is involved in it. So with that said, Steve, the floor is yours.
No, I prefer to sit. Hey, everybody, I just want to say it's a pleasure to be here. I have had a chance to look through the agenda for the previous sessions, and man, there's a bunch of great people on here. I tuned in about 10 minutes ago, and wow, that last speaker was wonderful. So it's just a privilege to, be in this venue. One of the reasons I consented to be the moderator is if you get me talking, we'll be here all day. So I want to give you 30 seconds of who I am. I live in Ventura County, California. I have a wonderful wife, big support there, and two boys, 17, and oh my gosh, the first one just turned 21 this week. So I do enjoy all the things that were mentioned. And like I said, I'm happy to be moderating today. We have three people on the panel today, two of whom I knew previous to this, and one that I'm very much looking forward to meeting. Their bios are online, but I'm just going to give them, 60 seconds to say hi and what's important about them. So let's go to you first, Jenny or Jennifer. Are you unmuted?
Hi.
Good.
So, Steve, thanks for getting me involved in this panel today. I also live in Ventura County, and I know Steve through volunteer work that we both do in order to raise awareness about organ, eye, and tissue donation. Both of us enjoy participating in volunteering to accelerate the knowledge in that area. My bio is, I'm gonna be really quick. I go to grad school, and then I enjoy being out on the trails, hiking, kind of in the middle of nowhere. So I want you to keep in mind that as a transplant recipient, I do tend to have activities outdoors that most people might think you can't do. So I'm one of these people that has been living with a transplant for 7 years, and I have no problems doing most of the things I love. So that's just a quick statement on that.
Thanks, Jenny. Wilson, do you want to go next then?
Definitely. Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me on. Lori, Suzette, it's been a long time. Isella, very nice to meet you. Yeah, my name's Wilson Dew. I go by the Renal Warrior online. I was formerly a dialysis patient for 5.5 years and just received my life-saving kidney transplant last year, March 8th, 2022. Throughout my journey, I became the strongest person I have ever been, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. What can I say? Life is good. Life is great. So that's who I am.
Hey, Julie. You got thunderstorms out there today?
Oh, not today. I don't know. Can you guys see me? I don't see myself. Can you see me or no?
I can't, and I think you have to turn that on your end. There should be a button in the lower left corner, the bottom, that says stop or start video.
Yeah, it started. I'm not sure why I'm not showing. All right.
Isn't technology wonderful?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. That's why I'm at my husband's office, because it's better than our house. Anyway, I'll just continue verbally. I was diagnosed with lupus in 1988. I was 20 years old. It's been a really long journey. They did confirm that I had kidney disease from a biopsy. I tried to save my kidneys for 9 years, but they did eventually fail. I did dialysis 3 separate times because lupus is kind of ups and downs. So I did PD and in-center hemo twice. I did receive a transplant in 99. Fast forward 16 years, I was diagnosed with melanoma. It spread very rapidly from stage 2 to stage 3C. Had all sorts of treatment for that. And finally, they said, you need the new immunotherapy that's just come out. But of course, that's boosting our system. I need it, we all want to be suppressed if you've got a transplant. So I had to let the transplant fail. Very crushing. It did last 1 more year, so it was 17 years. I did home hemo, next stage at night, cancer treatment in the day. It got to be too much. I went in center. Fast forward now 5 years, I'm cancer-free. I get back on the list, eventually diagnosed with kidney cancer. So right before getting on the list, I had both kidneys removed, but it had not spread. So finally, 14 months ago, I did receive a second transplant. Yeah, so it's been a crazy road, crazy road.
Well, I don't even know you, and I can safely say it couldn't happen to a nicer person.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you for that introduction. I just want to go back a bit, and I didn't really tell much of my kidney story, but let me think back now, would be 2003, perhaps. My kidneys started to fail. I, like Lori, have had kidney disease most of my life. It happened when I was 3 years old because I'm an old fart, and they didn't have childhood vaccinations back then. So I got a case of the measles, and my kidneys have been damaged since I was 3 years old. But when my kidneys finally failed, one of the things that really saved me psychologically and physically was connecting with Renal Support Network. So I owe Lori and the whole crew a bunch. So that's my shameless plug, Lori. Thank you. So we're just going to jump right into it. And I know you'll find out more about these 3 amazing transplant recipients as they answer questions. I'm going to stop about halfway through and give the audience a chance to answer questions, and then again before we end. I know we could each talk about all of these topics for a long time, but I'm going to ask you to kind of limit your comments to, perhaps 2 or 2.5 minutes max. And, somebody goes longer, somebody goes shorter, we'll just adjust. So first question. When I received my transplant, they had a little briefing for people who received transplants, and they gave you a list of things to do and a list of your next appointments and so forth. And usually they include the warning about not eating grapefruit and taking your medicine regularly and all that good stuff. But there's a lot of things that I have learned, and most transplant recipients have learned since they left the hospital. So of all of the things that you didn't learn when you were discharged, what thing has been the most valuable for you? And I'm going to go ahead and start with Wilson. You're fairly new.
Yes. Some things that I didn't know. There's a whole bunch of things, and you're talking about post-transplant, right?
Right.
One of the things that I did learn is that as I was trying to get in shape and qualifying for transplant during dialysis, I couldn't understand. I thought it was just my body. I couldn't get as fit as I wanted to. I was working really hard and seeing minimal gains. And it wasn't until after transplant, after about 6 or 7 months, I started training, and my body completely changed. I didn't know how far I could push the limits, things like that. It wasn't until I got in touch with a health coach who's also a kidney transplant recipient. and was completely educated on, with the amino acids going away with it during the dialysis process. And the body was just amazing. It was like after the transplant, it remembered what it was supposed to do, and everything started changing. Body composition started changing. You're able to breathe a whole lot more, and just taking more oxygen when you're doing all these physical activities. So I believe, was it Jennifer earlier that was talking about going out on hikes and going outside, doing things that would normally we aren't supposed to do. I'm still playing around with all of that, and it's just been amazing. I wish that the transplant center would have told me that go ahead and push it.
Thanks, Wilson.
Yeah.
Let's see. Julie, you want to tackle that question next?
Sure. Mine's probably a little more sensitive just with the cancers. I definitely have a lot more energy after this transplant. I try to be very healthy, eat very healthy. But just here's one silly thing. After my first transplant, it was 99. Of course, I knew we had to pre-med at the dentist. So now it's early 2000, and I go to get a cleaning, and they said, "Did you pre-med?" And I was kind of all proud. No, I'm transplanted now. And they said, "I think you still have to." So there's phone calls made back and forth, but it was just something that just slipped by. No one told me, you continue this for life. So they, obviously I had to reschedule and pre-med. I mean, it sounds so silly now, 23 years later, but it was just something like just never mentioned to me. And there's a lot of, you just have to be on top of things, just have to be on top of things. Very diligent with appointments and labs. I know a lot of younger patients transplanted and they don't like the side effects. I know a girl that actually stopped her medications and it failed. Depending on your age, doing all your pre-cancer screenings, whether it's a mammogram, your prostate, colonoscopy, you just have to stay on it because I'm a living example of the medications can make you more prone to cancer. So just really being on top of everything to me is the most important thing, and question things. I've changed medications sometimes and I was a little nervous asking, and they were very agreeable to everything. And they did change a transplant med that I was having very bizarre side effects to. So, always speak up, and the worst they're going to say is no.
And just a quick follow-up to that. How did you know when you thought you should change meds?
Just it was too much information, but a really weird side effect. So I just called, and I knew a lot of transplant patients at that point, and they mentioned some meds that they were on, and I suggested one, and they said, "Great, go for it. You can change it tomorrow." It was very early on. It was like a month in of the first transplant. But I was a little like nervous to ask, but what are they going to say no? So, but luckily they said yes.
So Jennifer, I'm going to let you answer to that question.
So I would say the key points would be that I learned are experiencing a urinary tract infection is not the same experience post-transplant. Personally, it was confusing. I've had several of them that can be common for kidney recipients. And that's meant that where I feel that pain is different than where I might have.
Lost their audio.
Yeah, she's frozen. Maybe she doesn't have a good connection. But Jennifer, come on back when you're there. I guess that I'm just going to throw in a little bit. There you are, Jennifer.
Okay, I don't know where it cut out. I've been having on and off internet issues that I never have except when I use Zoom.
Me too.
It's only with Zoom.
Yep, me as well.
Steve, would you tell me what the last thing was you heard, and I'll pick it up from there?
Well, you basically said that your experience with UTIs was different post-transplant.
Okay, so meaning where I feel pain when I have a UTI as a recipient, in what part of my body is really different than before transplant. So in the past, you might have felt that pain in the native kidney area And then now for me, it would be differently, more the low back and the hip area, same side as where the kidney is. So where that kidney is placed, this might be fun for people to know that when you receive a kidney transplant, it's in the front of your body. So if you were to take your hand and put it on your hip bone, and then aim your fingers in towards your midline of your abdomen, where the fingers are at is where your kidney will go, either the left or the right front. And so that's why where you experience pain from a UTI after being transplanted is really different, again, around maybe the hip and low back area. Second thing I would say is have a nephrologist that works well with you, your medical needs, and your lifestyle. I went through 2 nephrologists that weren't really working well with me. And the one I have now I've had for several years, and he's great. My third pointer would be definitely around medications. Communicate with your physician, communicate with your transplant team, and your primary, as we all know, right, recipients, your primary, your PN nephrologist that might be in your local area. Transplant hospitals aren't always in areas where we live. So you're going to have that double up system where you have your transplant center and their staff, and then you have your local physicians. For those with more medical issues, I'm one of those as well. I like to say I have a comprehensive team that really supports me and helps me live the life that I enjoy. I'm going to share one more thing because I think it helps people understand. After transplant, I've had 3 additional surgeries. So I'm bionic now because I've had both knees replaced and a hip. Mm-hmm. So again, having that team of medical providers that understands your needs as you, the recipient, is really valuable. And I would state to the previous comment, I don't take pre-antibiotics before a dental appointment because I'm allergic to 6 already.
Oh,
so
okay.
Everything's really unique for a recipient, and find what's tailored to you.
Yes.
Great points, everybody. Really good stuff. So when they send you home from the hospital, and you obviously have those appointments, like every other day for the first couple of weeks, and then, twice a week, and then it moves to weekly and monthly. You have to have people around you when you're out of the hospital to keep things moving along correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and send this question to you first, Julie.
My care team?
Yeah, basically, as far as the people that you went home to, your support team,
yes,
who was the most valuable to you and why?
My brother and my husband at home, but prior to the transplant, through my cancer, a friend of many decades knew that the transplant center I was going to required a lot of follow-up the first 6 weeks that she can't drive. So she offered right away that she would drive me those 4 to 6 weeks. And some of those days, waiting for infusions, they start 6 hours late. They were 16-hour days. So I couldn't have done it without her. My husband took so much time off with my cancers that she said, let him work, I'll drive you. And she was just invaluable, quite frankly. Just, I thank her every day for that because I really couldn't have done it without her.
And Jennifer, you have also had a lot of other medical issues, but immediately after the transplant, who helped you the most make that transition and why? Why did you think they were most important for you?
My way of addressing the caregiver, that's what we're talking about, is our caregivers, right, was really unique and challenging. That's because most of my family is not in the area. And unfortunately, my family this is common for a lot of dialysis patients. My family was not available or supportive. So the best thing I can tell you, which I laugh at now, is I had many conversations with my younger brother to try to help him understand that if I got what we affectionately notate as the call, I would really have to hustle up and get on a plane and just go to get that kidney. So I had many conversations. He didn't seem to understand that, because when that call came through and then I rang him, I told him it's now. And he said, now? And he said, well, it's not really a good time for me. And he said, can you schedule it for later? And I received my kidney from a deceased donor. There is no later. And I told him, as his bigger sister knows, it's now. Hustle up, book a flight, and get your behind out this way. You're up. And so I think, as much as I tried to tell my family, that caregiver support team, what was going to happen, there was just this disconnect a lot of the time. So my way of having caregivers, because I received my kidney out of state from where I live, that's a whole nother story. And so I had a combined team. So the first person that was there was my brother. He eventually arrived. And then I had different family members and friends, and they would kind of rotate in and out. And once I was home, then the bulk of my support, keeping in mind my family is not local, was really my community and friends. They all knew well in advance. They knew for years what was going on, and were happy to provide that support and to offer it. So what that might look for everybody when you're thinking of transplant is, who's going to get your groceries? You can't carry them yourself for quite a while. Who's going to put the water bottle on your water dispenser if you have one? Who's going to empty the kitty litter box if you have a cat? Who's going to pick up after the dog? Who's going to help with holding a baby? When you're initially after transplant, you're incredibly immunocompromised. So it's really determining who's best for these different roles. And that's the way I did it. Again, I think there's uniqueness in how we each handle this, but it's determining what the support is you'll need and who you're going to ask.
Thanks, Jennifer. There's been a couple of posts in the chat and question and answers that I'll come back to in just a minute. But I want to give Wilson a chance to answer that. Wilson, from what I see online, your family's been incredibly supportive in your whole life. Is there one person you can pick out?
Oh gosh, I mean, it's a whole slew of people. There's a whole team. My family's one thing, and out of my family, I would say my mother gets the MVP award. She wanted to help me even when I didn't want her help. She was tracking my appointment. She's like, I can go with it. I go, I can take care of myself. She's like, no, I'm going to go with you. So she went above and beyond. She made sure I was fed. She made sure I was at my appointments. She was there with me, went to every single appointment. And when the transplant team really put out there that you need an advocate to understand all these things, because after surgery, somebody needs to know what's going on. And she was on there just studying everything. English is not her first language, but she made sure she was present. So that's just my mother, the MVP, and my whole family, my sister, my brother, everybody's very supportive. But on top of that, I started a gym a few years ago to help out patients, and how we pay the bills is we have regular gym members, and the gym members all bought in to the mission that we have, which was helping out chronically ill patients live their best lives. So not only did I have my own family, I had my gym family where if I needed help, they would be there. When right after transplant, they were rotating meals, bringing it by at the house. So they were very, very supportive. They're my family outside my family. And then, the third group of people that was extremely helpful was National Kidney Foundation, the local chapter out here. My living donor is Amy Hewitt. She's the executive director for the National Kidney Foundation. She stepped up. And so all of them got involved and made sure that, we were both okay. I was able to meet my donor's father. Their family was with my family when everything was going down. And so just a whole community of help, which has been just tremendous to my recovery. And what an amazing experience.
Yeah, sometimes, there's that old saying that you can't pick your family, but you can pick your friends, and not everybody has those resources. So just being as involved as you can before you need those people is a real strength.
And one more thing, Steve, just to your point right there, being involved with the whole kidney community is such a tremendous help. I remember I believe it was in 2017 or 18, Lori invited me to come out, and I was able to speak at one of the events, and I met a lot of good people there, and it just being involved with the community is what actually got me my living donor, who is again a living donor from National Kidney Foundation. So I encourage everybody to get involved with the community, to go out there and advocate as best as you can, whether you're a patient, whether you're a post-transplant, on dialysis, whatever it is, get involved. You'll learn a whole lot more, and you meet great people.
Hey, thanks so much. So I wanted to just touch on a couple of questions that came up in the Q&A section, and they kind of relate to all of this, at least in my mind. The first question that I see, well, there's a thank you, so thank you. The second one is, how does being immunosuppressed affect you during COVID? And I'm just going to touch on that and say, there's no one answer that's going to make sense for everybody. I had the privilege of having 2 cases of COVID already. The first one was during the Delta variant, the really nasty one that killed, hundreds of people. And the wonderful thing was that during that time point, they actually had monoclonal antibodies therapy available for most people that were high risk. And that combined with, whatever, I didn't have very many symptoms and was able to continue life pretty much like normal. But if you talk to other people, there's been stories of world-class athletes who you would think have the strongest immune system in the world ending up in the hospital being very deadly sick. And the same approach to transplanted people is going to hold true. You never know how that virus is going to affect you. And so going forward for COVID, you just got to be your own best judge of what's appropriate, what environments to place yourself in. And, do you mask? Do you wash your hands 19 times? That's got to be a personal decision. And if anybody on the RSN staff wants to chime in on that, that's fine. But it's really difficult to answer that question. But that was my experience.
It's Russian roulette. Really, you have no idea how you're going to react to it. And I think we're learning more about it every day. I know that I get vaccinated, and I actually got COVID in September and had to be hospitalized, had to get remdesivir. And the first thing in my mind was, oh my God, I'm going to lose my kidney. That was the first thing that comes in your mind, right? And, my kidney is just fine. But I have to tell you, I've never had headaches so bad in my life. And it's COVID. And I think the more you can do to take care of yourself and reduce your risk. When it's a high level area, I don't go there. I don't go to those places if it's a very crowded area. But we still have to live. We're not in a bubble anymore. So it's finding that fine line, because it's scary. And I'm hoping that I will get some antibodies. They have the monoclonal antibodies, like you said, but we're still learning about COVID. We don't know what it does. And what's crazy about it, the only good thing about COVID is it's brought kidney awareness, because COVID likes the kidneys and it has gone after kidneys. And so the sad part about it is that's what it takes to get people to realize that their kidneys are important. And I think there's much more awareness now about your kidneys because of COVID, because it's been in the news so much.
And just to follow up on that, Julie, I don't mean to bring you into the conversation in a bad way, but I've known a couple of other people who have had lupus.
Yes.
And COVID has autoimmune parts to it. And, just like lupus, COVID can affect any part of your body. It's really I hate to use Lori's words. Oh, I love to use Lori's words. She's my favorite, but it's Russian roulette. You have no idea what's going to happen. So
Right.
I always tell people, just keep doing what you would do to protect your kidney.
Right.
Avoid stress, avoid, get exercise, eat right, take your meds, do all the things you would normally do, just in case there was another virus lurking out there that nobody knew about.
Right.
Just-
Yeah, I still wear a mask to this day.
Yeah.
I feel like I have kind of lived in a bubble. I was so fearful that the transplant center would say, I was afraid to ask them if they'd say, "Oh, you had COVID. Oh, come back in a year." I was so afraid of that. So, and then I had to live with my mother 2 summers ago. She had Parkinson's and dementia. And, we needed to move her in a facility. So we'd sit on opposite ends of the living room. I mean, because I had to be, she could no longer live alone. She'd always be, not right in her mind, trying to hug me. And it's like, please, please stay away. I mean, it sounded terrible, but I was just almost living in a bubble. And to this day, I really wear a mask everywhere still. I'm just, very fearful. And I just got my 4th booster. I had the 2 original shots and 4 boosters since, day one. So,
Well-
what you can do, wash your hands a lot.
Yeah, you do what you can do.
Right.
You can't do what you can't do.
Right.
Well, that's really interesting because one of the last questions that I see on the Q&A kind of takes us into the last question that I had for the panel. Okay, you got your transplant. What's next, right? And there's a transition back into normal life once you know that your transplant is stable. And for some people, that's 3 months out of the gate. For some people, that's 6 months, or who knows how long. It really depends on your health and, the support that you have. Some people go back to work. One of the questions that came through was about, my employer wants me to go back to work a month after my transplant.
Ooh.
Yeah, that seems a little steep to me, but that's an example of the real life that awaits us. And I know for me, when I got the second transplant and the first transplant, I kind of skipped out of the hospital, like, woo. And then I had family responsibilities, job responsibilities, and who knows what else, right? So let's go ahead and let's start with you, Jennifer, on this one. Knowing your personality a little bit, I can only imagine what your response is going to be.
You're probably thinking I jumped back into stuff real quick. That was actually not true. I returned. So again, I received my transplant out of state. So I was staying near the transplant hospital for the mandatory 5 weeks following transplant, doing just what you said, going in for appointments, the length and timing of those appointments reduced, and then I returned home. And much to my surprise, where I was living at the time, the housemate there wanted that room back. And so I ended up having to move. So I ended up having to move 4 months after transplant. Nobody wants to do that. And that was really challenging because I couldn't lift those boxes. I was having a hard time. You use your core strength, a lot of your abdominal strength for anything related to moving, packing stuff, twisting left and right. I couldn't do much of that. And then because I had to move, so originally I thought I was going to have about 6 months off. I had planned ahead that I was going to take 6 months off to recover, to transition, all of this type of stuff, and the best laid plans, right? So that didn't happen. And then I moved to the area at that time in Ventura County, and I had taken off from work. So then I had to hurry up and find a job at the same time. And I wasn't really strong enough to go back to work full time. So there are certain rules regarding kidney recipients and people on dialysis when it comes to federal support. That's the way I'm going to put that. So you can read up on those pamphlets. It's very detailed. So I ended up finding a part-time job because thankfully I work in accounting and you can always find work in that field. But again, I can only work part-time. So at some point, that supervisor asked me and said, "You're great. We want you to work full-time." And I had to tell the person, this relates to going back to work, "I'm sorry, I'm not ready to work full-time. I am willing to keep working part-time, and I'm willing to set up a schedule to keep working part-time if that will work for you." And lucky for me, that person said, "Yes, we think you're great and we'd be happy to work around your schedule." So that was my initial shock right after transplant of having to return to work sooner than I thought. And I was still at the point, which shake your head if this is you as a recipient, I needed daytime naps almost every day for probably the first 6 months. And how do you schedule that into work, right? Excuse me, I need to go take my nap. Now where I work, it's a great company. And anytime there's something, they're very accommodating. When it comes to little COVID outbreaks going on, I don't have to say anything. And as soon as I even place the phone call or have a chat with my supervisor, then that person will say, "I know what you're going to say. You're working from home 100% right now. You let us know when you want to come back into the office. You're in the driver's seat." So, there's different types of employment arrangements. My recommendation is to try to think about it in advance and really understand that whatever you think is your recovery time, and I want to hear Wilson's opinion on this as well. I found whatever recovery time I thought I would need, I had vastly underestimated. I was really fit before dialysis. Dialysis reduced my fitness level. And like Wilson said, it's hard to get fit again while you're still on dialysis. So it took me a longer period of time. So I would, again, repeat, whatever you think your plan is, it's probably going to take you longer.
Yeah,
So-
it's just to respond. Yeah, it took a lot longer than I expected. I wanted to come out jumping, but I wasn't able to do that.
So Julie, I want you to speak up for people like you and I who can't jump anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the one thing, I was talking to a friend of mine who's had 2 or 3 transplants, and he was asking what the difference was like between 31 and 53. And I said, enormous. Plus, obviously the 2 cancers. So yeah, I always said, "Oh, give it 3 months, give it 6 months." I would say at the time, 53. I just turned 55. Maybe 8 months, 6, 8 months. It took me definitely longer.
So I want to address one other question in the Q&A because it was one of the things that I learned through experience after my transplants. Let me read the question verbatim. Have you felt like you've gotten any illnesses or issues related to your immunosuppression that you would not have had otherwise? Sorry. So in some of the transplant centers, they send home a pretty thorough packet of things to watch out for, diseases or other issues that could come up. And we talked about COVID already. But a lot of times it becomes your responsibility as a transplant recipient, not only to read that information, but also to make sure that your transplant team or your doctor screens you for those other issues. There are certain things that live in our bodies that a person who's not immunosuppressed has no problem dealing with. So as an example, 4 years out from my first transplant, I started having these really bad GI issues. And it's a bacteria that's in everybody's gut, and it's called Entamoeba. And depending on which study you look at, 20 to 30% of transplant people have an overgrowth of that bacteria, which gives you really bad GI issues. It's coming out both ends, if you know what I mean.
Nice.
And that may have well have precipitated the loss of my first transplant. Just to be clear, there's no way to know why someone really loses a transplant, because you don't do a post-mortem on a transplant that's not working, right? So, most transplant facilities check for BK virus and also for Epstein-Barr, but there are other things that should be tested on a regular basis. And so I would encourage everybody who's not aware of those things to get on the Renal Support Network site and take a look at post-transplant care, and just to basically Google and find information, not from somebody who's trying to sell you something, but from a reputable source, a reputable hospital, NIH, CDC, whatever, because there are certain risks with being immunosuppressed. I always recommend that people do the best they can to take care of their body naturally. The stronger your body is before transplant, the stronger your body will be afterwards. And, as Jennifer and Wilson have both said, as I experienced, you're a bit of a weakling after transplant because you haven't been using those muscles. So fitness is really important, whether it's swimming or walking or running marathons or whatever. See, I told you, you get me started talking. Isela, how are we doing on time?
You've got about 4 more minutes.
Okay, well, the mic is open for anybody. If you've got a question, put it in the chat or the Q&A.
Hey, Steve, I have a comment. This is Lori Hartwell. One of the things that I've heard sadly from several people is that if you have a kidney transplant and you need a hysterectomy, you need to have your transplant surgeon in the room. Because, and this is something people don't educate you. I mean, I had to have a hysterectomy, and my transplant surgeon was in the room because your anatomy is different. Hysterectomies are bloody. I'm being very, very, graphic, but they can clamp it off, and people have lost kidneys from a hysterectomy. So you always have to involve your transplant team, and it is so important. And then the other thing I've sadly heard is that, people get their blood drawn every 2, 3, 4 months, you get a little bit out and you're like, oh, I'm fine. If you gain or lose weight, your medication levels, your tacrolimus level, and one of my friends that I knew, he started weight building. He started, getting in shape and losing weight, but he never got his blood checked. And, the drugs that we take for transplant are nephrotoxic, which is kind of ironic. And his levels became so high because he had lost weight. He lost his transplant. So you have to be really aware that, the transplant meds today are due to the levels in your body based on your weight and how you react. And you just can't be too cautious. And I've also learned, I've heard this from a few people, is after COVID, my tacrolimus levels were all over the place. Yeah. I mean, I had to do that a couple of times, like, get a lot of different tests, because one day it's 4 and the next day it's 10. And I mean, you need to regulate it. Something's going on with COVID to interfere with it. So, just a couple of things to be mindful of, because we don't know what we don't know. And then it's like, oh man, I wish somebody would have told me.
Thanks for that, Lori. It's very appropriate advice. Again, just this session alone could go 3 hours. And I want to respect the organization of Hope Week. Just one other thing, Lori, this is really kind of in your purview. someone has requested an exercise program from one of our panelists. What would you suggest? Should we share emails? How could we help them with that?
Laura, you're muted.
We do some get fit groups, and certainly, Wilson, reach out to me. Maybe we'll add another one. I mean, we've been trying to do this for years, and if you'd be interested, I'll definitely talk to you about it, and then we'll try to offer that. Because for those of you who know me, or the most important thing with this illness is creating networks of friends, and the only way you create networks of friends is getting to know them and spending time with them and finding things that are in common. And one of the things that's really frustrating at times, and I know Julie and I and everybody, I just want to give out Julie's my dearest, longest friend. We have been
You were the one friend that made the difference, because I had nobody.
we've known each other since the early 90s.
97, yeah.
It's but one of the things that happens when you're transplanted, and Wilson, I want to relate this story to you because you asked for a kidney for a long time. And I think one of the problems people didn't respond is because you look too good. You didn't look sick enough.
No, 100%.
And I'm like, geez, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Like, you're taking care of yourself. And then also when you have a transplant, people think you're cured. It's not a cure.
Right.
It's and you still, I'm getting older too, so I don't have the energy I had, but it's like an invisible illness, or like you look fine.
Yes.
And people expect you to just go back to normal. And you can't. There was a person who spoke on Tuesday, and I the name escaped my mind, but there's just such a lack of understanding from the community, and we just got to connect with people who understand. We can't try to convince people to understand us. And it's really sad. People are like, you're cured, you got a transplant, you don't have any problems. I'm like, no. So I just wanted to make that point.
If I can say one thing.
Yeah, no, Laura, you're absolutely correct.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Julie.
Sorry.
Julie.
Just a quick thing to add, to what Lori said. A friend of ours, very nice. Her mother took us out to dinner and, knows nothing about this, and said, "Oh, I'm so glad you can put all of this behind you." And I just sort of smiled, like it's never really about, I didn't say a word. I just thanks, but it's just like people don't understand at all,
And that's okay. God bless them. That's why we're here for each other, So there was one comment that came up a minute ago about someone in a wheelchair. And, I've essentially had to kind of create my own exercise program again, because I can't just, put on my sneakers and go for a run anymore. I have other issues that inhibit my mobility. And so I'm also willing to share some things you can do at home. I spend way too much on social media, right? And I get pushed these little exercises you can do in your chair. There's, there's a million ways to exercise, and you have to fit something to your lifestyle and to your abilities, So I'm happy to share that with you offline, Lori.
Anyone who wants pointers about outdoor activities, I'm happy to provide information, Lori, if that's something you think people would find helpful. Pre-COVID, my nephrologist, although he would keep a straight face, was somewhat terrified when I told him I would go out in the middle of nowhere, off grid, and a lot of the time by myself, but I've been hiking a long time. There's certain precautions I take as a transplant recipient to go do those activities. And then I don't know about Wilson, but a lot of my workouts I do at home. I don't really go to a gym as much anymore because of being immunosuppressed and that infection risk. So I learned to change my routine to being at home and doing things there. And it's a constant adjustment. There are always things coming up. And then talking about waiting a long time. And I don't know, Wilson, how long you were waiting. But I was waiting on dialysis for 5.5 years. And I think, I think a lot of the reason was like we've brought up, that I didn't look that sick. I was younger than I am now. And I'm actually older than you probably all think, which speaks for the exercise, probably. But yeah, people didn't think I looked sick. And so I was not able to find a living donor. I mean, the deceased donor came through first. And it's really a weird thing. And then now, the way I'm in now, when I tell people I'm a transplant recipient, they're shocked. So, you know, we're not always everything that we look on the outside, right? Either way. Wilson, what do you got on it?
Yeah, no. You know, same thing. I don't do home workouts. I own a gym, so I'm working out in the gym. Yeah, I would say for anybody looking to exercise, my biggest advice for people, especially when you're recovering or if you're on dialysis, is really track what you do. I train dialysis patients that really we'd walk half a block and then I'll send them home. But we track that every single day until that half a block becomes a block, and that one block becomes 2 blocks. And I think a lot of confidence is the biggest key to starting an exercise program. If you see that you're growing, if you see that you're getting better, you're going to be more apt to continue on with it. So I recommend a lot of folks figure out what a baseline is, do little by little, build your confidence, and bank little wins. Doesn't even matter what you do. If it's a 2-minute walk, it's a 5-minute walk, whatever you can do, figure that out, and then just continue at it. And again, Lori, we can talk offline. I have specific programs for patients post-transplant and also on dialysis. So yeah, we'll definitely talk outline. I have resources for those things as well.
And the thing that I think is so important with this is that whatever you do, it doesn't just affect your body. I mean, you know, when I was active, I ran because I wanted to eat my favorite foods. And even before I ate the ice cream and the pizza, the endorphins that I got by using my muscles made me feel better. So whatever you can do, it doesn't matter. Whatever you can do, it's going to build not only physically, but emotionally. So, hey, who's got the ding, 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 the timer? Who's got the gong?
I think we need to wrap up here.
Thank you so much, everybody.
We got some raffle prizes to do, and I just wanted to say all of you are wonderful. Jennifer, in addition to exercise, you know, steroids is a secret to youth too. It takes all the wrinkles out. That's what I've found.
Oh, I've got wrinkles. It's just I've used what little lighting I have to just make me look better today. It was, you know, what furniture did I need to move? A quick hustle before getting on here. Yeah, and I take prednisone as well. So, you know, that's just part of the bargain.
It takes all the wrinkles out.
It hasn't removed mine. That's not true for me.
You always got to look for the silver lining, right? Love you guys. I think we're all ready to probably go enjoy our Friday night, right?
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Steve.
Julie.
We'll see you guys soon.
And a shout out to our corporate mission partners for making this happen.